Good evening. I am Amadou Ngari. Now, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill has finally been signed by President Muhammadu Buhari after multiple amendments. This is coming after protests and demonstrations by civil society organizations. The Constitution Amendment bills have also been voted on at the National Assembly. Tonight, my guest is the Executive Director of the Electoral College Nigeria, Kunle Lawal, and he helps to break down the implications of the actions of the President and the lawmakers. Secondly, welcome to Top Talk.
It's my pleasure to be back here.
All right. Let's start with the Electoral Act and the intrigues and everything and all that happened all the way to the president finally signing it. What are your comments on the journey and finally achieving this goal?
Well, I must commend everyone who participated and wanted something different for Nigeria, especially within its electoral system, for the efforts and, of course, the push towards getting this done. But this is not to say that a lot of things that went on during that time were not supposed to go on in a democracy. And I would like to point out first, everybody's clamor for the president's assent, when naturally the National Assembly could have been pushed to veto the president on the matter. And this was a part not necessarily considered. So it seemed like it was one man against the country when it shouldn't have been one man against the country. It actually should have been a total push for something better by all arms of government getting everything done.
All right. I was going to go somewhere else, but now that you mention it, people have labeled the current National Assembly, quote-unquote, rubber stamp, or that they're not as tough on whatever. And some other persons argue that the legislature doesn't have to be at loggerheads with the executive for it to work. Now, in that respect, do you think the National Assembly basically kind of doing exactly what the president wanted? Is that a sign that they didn't do well, or do you think it was in the interest of just having harmonizing and doing things together?
I try to always understand what people mean when they say what the president wanted. If the president loves this country and every other person in the National Assembly loves this country, then that means what the president wants is exactly what we want. But at this point, I think what everybody tries to refer to when they discuss such things is that they are looking at the separation of powers. How effectively has that been used? That there are powers being separated across tiers of government or arms of government. And in my case, if you look at the number of bills recently signed, amendments recently passed by the National Assembly, and then with the Electoral Act, it's beginning to look like this has become Nigeria's most successful assembly in Nigeria's history. And that's shocking. They might have had a rough start, but at the end, they'll be judged at the end of their electoral year, being honest.
That is true. Now, let's go into the specifics of the matter. Take, for instance, the president saying he wanted a consensus, direct and indirect, instead of just an
that was actually slotted in by the Senate.
Yeah, but it was one of the reasons that he mentioned he didn't sign it initially. And ironically, he didn't actually say anything until he had an interview on national TV where he now responded, okay, this is what I want and this is the things I feel are the issues. What do you make of his excuses or his rationale for delaying his signing? And also, after the National Assembly did make the corrections that he asked for, we had people from the presidency replying that the president has a number of days, and till he gets to that day, you're just making noise. So what do you make of the delay and his excuses?
The truth is, whenever we clamor for something, we should also remember that there are laws guiding this operation. So whenever the National Assembly transmits a bill to the president for his assent, they have 30 days till it's signed by the president before you start to scream wolf on fire or house on fire. So though it's shocking that the executive could have signed it a lot earlier, considering they wanted to sign it, but they left it till 30 days. I think it's all in the balance, trying to show executive power or force. And these are necessary balances that everybody plays within politics. Now, did Nigeria suffer for it? Yes. Right now, INEC has had to pull out a timetable which ends primaries and court resolutions on primaries by 3rd June. This is probably the tightest set of primaries we've ever had, and this is all because a legislative and an executive could not just put their shoulders down and get things done for the country. So at this point, we're all going to pay the price for that disharmony.
All right, that's fair. And now let's talk about some of the provisions or what's actually in the act, such as one act now that the president also has, commented on, which is the one that affects public office holders and appointees, government appointees anyway, and basically that they have to resign before participating in primaries. What's your opinion on that particular part of the Electoral Act?
Because if you ask my own personal opinion, I would say I think it's necessary for people to resign while holding public office preceding the primaries, because they could use the furnishing of their office, and this includes security or whatever, to bulldoze their way across the primaries. I'll give you an example. If I'm a sitting governor and I want to participate in the primaries for Senate, if I come with the machinery of my office, there's no how I wouldn't win that, because of course I have this power of the state behind me. It will be unfair to other Nigerians who of course are entitled to their own freedom of expression and of course wanting to take in their own political position. So at that point, it's not really fair. So do I agree? Yes, I think public officers should step down before a primaries.
What about the argument that, some would make that this money or this funding or whatever I'm using is my personal, and it has nothing to do with the government? When people try to separate themselves from their office and say, I'm not mismanaging anything, I'm not...
I think a mistake most Africans make is that they think finance is power. It's not. Power is power, and there's no difference between power being power. The office you sit on, it has the power and it's backed by the Constitution, which means you can move security. You have the protection of the state. That is where the problem is. It has nothing to do with where exactly the money is coming from.
Right, and that's fair. So let's still talk about some of the issues the bill has caused. For a while now, people have been condemning civil societies in this administration, saying that they are not as vocal, they're not as forward as they were in the previous administration, and that they had a big role to play in basically changing that government or leading to the change of that government, and that they've not done so well. But prior to this, we saw a lot of people demonstrating, protesting. Do you think that had any effect on the president eventually signing it, or it was just something that was done, separate and had no effect on the outcome of events?
Okay, that's a dicey question to answer. So I'll take it from a few angles. So civil societies in the past administration, they seem to scream a lot. And because everybody was in tandem with the screaming they wanted, it seemed like they were right and they were acting right. But this time, I think more people are more politically conscious. So they've been asked to work within the confines of the law and within time. Has this been good? Yes. Sometimes have voices been suppressed? Maybe. But what is key is that we need to understand that most times you cannot engage a system you barely understand. And herein I'll call this: if there was going to be a protest by civil societies as regards the president assenting the bill, they should have, I don't know why they did it before, but maybe before could have seemed like a premeditated action trying to get the president to know we're serious. But if you were to follow it legally, though everybody has the right to to protest, but there was no need for protest till past the 30th day. But if they say if the protests came out and they were forced to do things, then it makes it sensible. But there's a key clause I'd like to address here. I was surprised that, and I wanted to say all, I was surprised that most of the civil organizations did not think to push forward the narrative that the National Assembly should veto the president. The president serves at the pleasure of the people as the executive head of government. The legislative arm is the core representation of the man on the ground. And if the man on the ground wants the bill signed, the National Assembly should have been moving to veto the president.
So just your personal opinion, when the president asks for that the direct primaries shouldn't be imposed, at that point, do you feel the National Assembly should have gone ahead with the bill as it was, or perhaps make the change and go ahead, or how do you have resolved that situation?
Well, if you look at the Electoral Act, it gives political parties the liberty to be able to, for candidates to emerge for different positions. So if you impose direct primaries on a political party, it indirectly means that you are infringing on the freedom of political parties for candidates to emerge at their own liberty. I think that's why the president held this. And this takes a little knowledge of the Constitution. Most people just think it's a personal thing. So, of course, somewhere along the line, the Senate snuck in the consensus candidate, making it 3 forms of presentation for candidates by political parties. So we have the consensus, direct and indirect primaries. So dependent on which a party chooses to use, is that liberty to choose, which still, as protected by the Constitution, is parties are at liberty to choose which.
So in that way, does it mean the president was actually right to withhold?
Yes, as much as we refuse to agree, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, okay, now let's talk about, let's move a little bit, so we'll go back and forth now to the Constitution Amendment. And now we have that independent candidacy is now a thing. It's going to be something that would be allowed. How do you see that affecting the political climate?
I think it's a brilliant thing, but with caution. So if you're going to run for local government offices, councillor, I think it's brilliant. Local government chairman, I also think it's exceptionally brilliant. I think a councillor has like less than about 5 wards. A local government chairman has about 10 wards. If you break this down, these are now up to 60 polling units. It's easy for them to manage, get people. You might not need that much of a party structure, and you can compete because it's kind of a restricted system. But when you start to go up to state governor and president, I'll give you an example. Imagine an independent candidate. In Nigeria, we have about 176,000 polling units, a little over 176,000 polling units. Imagine if you were just to put 2 polling agents at all the polling units in Nigeria. Let's say you give them 5,000. 5,000 times 2, that's 10,000. 10,000 multiplied by 176,000, that's 1.76 billion on election day alone as an independent candidate. It is totally impossible. We've seen even in the US and countries that have it. Well, you know how many votes can US score, so let's profit there.
Right. But I'm sorry to take you back. Maybe to clarify, when you say if you give them 5,000, what do you mean?
Of course, polling agents, the duty of polling agents is to help secure your votes while you're in their party representatives. They help secure your votes. That's at a polling unit. And they are necessary so that, of course, nobody miscounts your votes you have a record, just like INEC has a record of voting on that day. So if you look at it, of course, you must give them a little thing for refreshment or whatever while they are there. You don't just leave them to stand there. And that's where the power of big parties actually come from. Because the issue with the fringe parties are that they can't afford that, and that's the structure they talk about. They can't afford to have so many people in polling units. So sometimes their votes are being shifted indirectly.
And that's interesting. Now, to mention another part of it, diaspora voting, which had needs and failed to move to the next level. What was your opinion on that?
Well, my personal opinion is I don't think we're ready for diaspora voting. And this is not because the country is not ready. This is not because the diaspora is not ready. This is because diaspora voting will actually rival about half of Nigeria's voting population. And these are people that are used to listening to ideologies because of where they live. They will not consider a candidate according to party, and they also will not be restricted to religious bias and want the best for the country. So it indirectly means that if they pass diaspora voting, we virtually might not see the return of politics as we know it. And about 95 of the entire political class will be wiped out of existence.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, if you're the ones deciding the law is a bad thing. If you're me and you sitting there as normal Nigerians, that's a good thing.
Okay.
So it depends on what angle you're looking at it from. And I don't think diaspora voting is something that they'll be really happy to get or want to get passed, because, of course, to them it's an issue.
Do we even have the capacity for that? I mean, electronic voting is not even How would that work? Does it mean people sign
It's simple. Everybody will have a date for Nigeria's abroad. Will have a date. Or everybody just walks to the embassy, which is normally in the capital of a country, and all of us just troop to the embassy, vote, and go off. Countries do it. India. I've seen India do it in Nigeria. People that were not in India at the time vote in Nigeria, in the Indian embassy in Nigeria. And, you know, it's quite a system which, you know, is simple to orchestrate, to pull together. Everybody just comes to Abuja, votes, and goes back.
Right. And now, back to the Electoral Act and all the provisions it has, how do you foresee elections changing or, being better or different than we have it currently?
Well, I see a part that transmission of results are now electronic as a big plus. That's a very big plus because most of the rigging occurs between collation, just before you get to collation between the polling units and that. So if that has been done electronically, it would be cutting down rigging by a lot. One of the key parts is also the push for primaries to be done quickly, and then I think the cost of nomination forms, stating that the cost of the presidential nomination form should not exceed 10 million naira. The cost of governor's form should not exceed 5 million. And then I think Senate 2 million and way down the line. These were things that cost as much as 40 million in the last elections.
Right, well, that's fair. Now, just to speak on the political environment currently and how things are working. We've been having third forces or third force trying to emerge, but it seems like they're splintered at the moment. Now, do you think come 2023, this is on a political matter, now not on the act specifically, do you see any of these people who want to be the third option being able to make a difference or a change before or during 2023?
Number one, I don't think it's democratically right to call anybody a third option. And if you're not referring to someone that's not in one of the giant two elephants, of course, I know what you're talking about. But the moment Nigerians will stop to see people as third force or big two parties, that's when the country will start to move forward democratically. It's a big problem, and we should be seeing ideas and thought processes and visions and manifestos and seeing where people are going to than necessarily paying attention. The political party is just a vehicle from being an average citizen to becoming an elected officer serving the Federal Republic of Nigeria and its people. But we've tend to pay so much to the clout that's why when people get into office and now have to deliver governance, there's nothing there, because all we wanted was the charade be preceding it. So it's like a kid enjoying eating the wrapper of a sweet and then throwing the sweet away. That's exactly what we do with governance.
But do you think that's actually possible? I say this because countries that have progressed farther than us, democratically speaking, and otherwise, they still somehow have this issue. For instance, I think the last candidate that was not a Republican, the last president in America that was not a Republican or a Democrat was in the 1800s or so. And since then, it's been either of the parties. And this is a vastly progressed democracy than ours. And they still seem to just see these two major options. So is there ever a time you see Nigerians being able to break away from that mindset and start looking at people and what they say and not just the party behind them?
I love the fact you brought up America, and I'll bring up Britain. The Labour Party was able to put people together and then take over the most houses in the parliament, and that was because they made alliances. Now the question is, the quest for power, if you leave it alone, will always be dictated by a few. Till everybody decides to consolidate their strengths and drive for a real drive that's not about a person, but about an entire country and its way forward, we might never see a power switch from the big two.
Yeah, that's fair. And let's go back to constitution amendments. We're going back and forth. A particular bill that is causing a lot of, or the failure of a particular bill that is causing a lot of controversy now. We've had protests, I think, yesterday morning, and people are really clamoring for them. I'm talking about pro-women bills. Yes, pro-women bills that were need. Let me put it that way. The bill seeking to create special seats for women in the legislature. We had another bill, I think that seeks to impose citizenship on a person based on if they marry a woman in the country, which was also need. And then I can't quite recall the last one. But anyway, what's your opinion on these, on the pushback?
Well, let me start with that of marriage before I get to, because that's a longer talk. So, very few countries have that clause in effect that when you marry a woman, you're part of the country. I'm not saying that Nigeria should not have that, but I think it's also in protection of Nigeria being the biggest, most populous black nation. We already have a massive population. We're not trying to get a population to feel what we already don't have space for us around it. So I think it's more of a statistical thing than it is a gender thing. But, you know, I think what's good for the goose is also good for the gander. So at this point, I also think some concessions should be made. Maybe if you're married to a Nigerian woman for 10 years, you can now become a citizen of Nigeria. It shouldn't be just you marry a Nigerian woman and you become a Nigerian. Because even if you see situations where a man marries, the woman has to accept to want to be a Nigerian. It's not automatic like that. Now I'll go to the issue of the special seats. Now, every time I hear this, it makes me understand the political illiteracy of the people asking for it. So I'll go back. You want to create special seats. If there are special seats created within the Senate, they will not have voting rights. I think nobody's understanding this. Secondly, they will not be able to, what are you going to do? You have to create a special unit for them because the constitution is clear on constituency, states, and local government. So if you're going to create these things, that means these are ad hoc seats of Senate. Voting rights will be poor, even if given. 2, for the existing provisional seats, parties will say women already have their own seats. Get out of the room. 3rd, this will just exactly seem like the situation where we have with female leaders in political parties, thereby shortchanging women in positions that actually matter within the party. I don't think women should have even argued or thought through that process because let's be honest, let's look at it. Are we going to be in Abuja, then Amak will say, they'll say Amak produce woman, then Buhari produce man, or how is that going to work? Nobody has thought of it liberally. Everybody's looking at it from an emotional point of view. This will not improve equity with female participation. For anybody in politics, going for a step high up, which is the Senate, is not an easy. I've run for Senate before, I'll tell you what it is. I'm so scared to try that thing again. So it's not an easy walk in the park. What I was thinking would have helped ease the situation. It was okay, at councillor level and local government chairman level, across all parties, all political forms for women are free. And if those positions are filled up with women, in 4 or 5 years, it's a gradual process. Well, we always love knee-jerk decisions. In 4 or 5 years, you see those women moving into State House of Assembly, Federal House of Rep, and then graduating to the Senate. And then we could move up to governor and president. But that is if we start to take these major steps that are foundational and not knee-jerk thought process that we think will actually allow women participate when what we are doing is actually undermining the female gender.
All right, so that's, I think, an interesting way to lay it out because a lot of people just have been looking at it like you said. Still on that, let's move on to some other matters now. During the course of the constitution amendments, there's a particular bill that, I wonder if you can help break down about separating the office of the Attorney General from the Attorney General of the Federation or something about that.
Minister of Justice
and Attorney General. Now, why? And there was a lot of kudos for that decision. Can you break it down as to why that is a good thing, or what it even means in the first place?
Okay, it's a slow process. In other countries of the world, you have the Minister of Justice who's appointed to serve at the pleasure of the President. Now, this doesn't have to be a lawyer or anything. He's just an administrative office working within the cabinet. The Attorney General, on the other hand, is required to be someone who's of repute in law. Now, to enhance the separation of powers between the judiciary and the executive and legislative, it is better the Attorney General is fully functional within the judiciary and not someone who responds to the cabinet operation of the President, thereby separating the powers. You've heard the concept of the separation of powers. So when you get to that point, now the next point we are going to be going to probably after that is that the Attorney General will not be appointed by the President. You probably ratify but be appointed by a Supreme Council of Judges, thereby making the judiciary independent for the first time in Nigerian history.
That's interesting. Now, generally, if you had to, just to round up now, rate the process, what you saw on the constitutional amendment, how would you rate it? And also, were there bills that failed, that you felt should have passed?
Let's remember that democracy is a continuum, and this will continue. This will continue being a war, not a war, or a debate, an ongoing debate constantly. I would say that I give the National Assembly at least 75% passing these bills. And let's remember that most of these bills were made by Nigerians, these bills that were passed. It was during the constitutional review that went through states and whatever, and it was information that came up, and even across the Electoral College and a few others had bills they had submitted, though altered, but got them to pass. We have to understand that democracy is a staircase, and we need to continue walking up slowly. So there are things that passed that we know we'll be able to improve better, and there are things that didn't pass that we know go back to the drawing board and sit down as civil societies and as individuals and try to push for better bills along the way. But generally, I must commend the National Assembly for its work. It's impressive to see that the power, and I'm sure the commendation they are really getting from all of this will make them know that they probably were sleeping earlier and they can't afford to be lackadaisical again. So I think it's a win for Nigeria, and that's the best win.
All right, now that's fair. Now, just finally, a personal question now. I know I don't know if you're affiliated or you have friendship or you're connected with a group I know called the Nigerian Alliance, which is basically about helping young persons or younger persons get into legislative positions. That being said, and I know you also mentioned that you don't want to go for it again, but I want to know, will you one day be running again, and how would you, how would things be different now?
I would say something. The strength of a democracy is in legislative. My association with the Nigerian Alliance, of course, the same association with the Electoral College has across board. We work in tandem across political parties. We have partnerships with the ADC, the Nigerian Alliance, which functions under the PDP cluster of this thing. We also have strategic relationships with the APC and the SDP. For at least those four parties, I can say as the executive director of the Electoral College, we have help and assist, and this is all in a bid to improve democracy across board. Would I be running for office again? Yes, I will. Will it be very soon? No, it won't. Third, will it be the same legislative office? Probably not, but let's see what time has to hold, and I look forward to that.
All right, so thanks for that snippet. We'll be looking forward to seeing more. Thanks for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
All right.